Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Prez. This is episode 439. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Prez. That is @_Presidente on Twitter. Prez, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's basketball season. Definitely not thinking about other sports and failures associated with them. I am fully ready for only basketball discussions here forth for the future.
No baseball. That's how I take it.
I don't even know what baseball is. I'm talking about basketball on this podcast.
So you're not interested in talking about Juan Soto's future?
I don't even know who that is, bro.
I have a feeling you do know. I feel like you're lying, but we're going to let it slide. We will talk about the Knicks. But before we do that, I do make the announcements. First being that Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and you have not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store. You can find all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave over the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business, and you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed it is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Metzkos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. It's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. This comes with a variety of additional benefits, like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours. Truly, one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not, none of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without Bet Online, whose ad read I unfortunately do not have up right now, but I'm about to pull it up right this second. Everybody get excited. It is time for me to read the ad read. Here we go. It's that time of the year again. The NBA is back from opening tip-off to buzzer beaters. BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, to political props. Head to the website today to get into the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Nothing like wagering on the future of the country, right? You know, it's just fun stuff right there. All right. The Knicks, they defeated the Heat on Wednesday night, 116-107. Karl-Anthony Towns pretty easily his best game as a Knick. 44 points on 17 and 25 shooting, 4 or 5 from 3. Just a dominant performance for him. Absolutely destroyed Bam, destroyed everybody. Whoever they put on him, you know, Bam, Thomas Bryant, obviously. Butler on switches. It didn't matter what they threw at him. He was on it from you know the tip, and he actually talked about like he's I guess he's had a good history playing in Miami. He's talked about like I guess he likes playing in the building. He's actually 11-1 in his career against Bam Adebayo, which is nuts. I guess he just has his number, but yeah, I mean he looked fantastic and. I think more important than just, you know, obviously him looking good was one, that they were looking to get him the ball, two, how they were looking to get him the ball. It wasn't just like straight post up feeds. It wasn't just kind of like, all right, let's run this action and get him the ball at the elbow or the top of the key and clear out. I thought a lot of it flowed. They looked like a pretty cohesive unit for most of this game. Obviously, they had stretches where they didn't. The start of the game was not great. The start of the second half was really bad. But they got it together. And again, I think they had their best team performance offensively. It wasn't just Cat, though obviously Cat kind of was the central focus of it. It flowed around him. Brunson found a much better rhythm in the second half after really struggling to kind of like balance his point guard duties with I'm also supposed to score a lot of points role on the team. but that he had a much better second half. They actually were able to get him a few catch and shoot threes as well in the second half, which was good to see. And yeah, Josh Hart, what a fantastic game for him. Mikal Bridges, probably, I mean, not one of his, not, I think the previous, at least the Indiana game was clearly his best game, but I just like to see him getting a fucking shit ton of volume up from three. Took 11 threes in this game, a bunch off of movement, which I
wanted to talk about that. I just actually did a video on it. I don't know when it's going to come out, but like after Cat, that was the thing that jumped out watching the game to me. Was like, we've been wondering, all right, like Brunson and Cat, we know they're capable of putting up volume at times. They haven't yet, but we know they're capable. And it was like, okay, you got other guys who can shoot. Deuce obviously can put up volume, but like OG's never gonna, I think, put up a shit ton of volume. So the question was like, can Mikal do it, right? Because the only time he's gotten double digits threes per 100 was when he was a number one option, and he's very far from that now. So it's like, okay, how is he gonna actually go about getting up so many threes when he can't shoot from deep, right? He's not gonna pull up 4 feet behind the 3-point line. He's literally never done that. And he's not really going to have a ton of chances to like, isolate and pull up on somebody. So apparently the answer is just transition threes and shockingly movement threes, which he hasn't done in really ever. He's always done a little bit of it, but it's never back in Phoenix. It wasn't really part of his game. It was a little part of his game in Brooklyn, but not really. So, it's a really good call by him and Tibbs because we know he's aces from the corner, and just being able to just do like short movement threes, right? Just from the corner to where the break begins and just take like baby movement threes like that or in transition. That's a game changer. And to your point, like even throwing all the fucking nerd shit out, like he was taking those joints with confidence and he was talking mad shit. Like to me, the turning point in the game, we were down 60-70 and we had a fast break, of which we barely ever do. And Mikal has the ball, crosses half court.
By the way, Mikal on fast breaks would prefer if he never leads another one ever again in his life.
Or only if he pulls up from three, because apparently like that's it. We don't need any more adventures. So he pulls up 3 on 5 Heat, 3 Knicks, early shot clock, down 10 in the third quarter, and he's just like, fuck you guys, I'm shooting this shit, eat a dick, Heat. And he splashed that shit, and he started off the game like taking some hard threes, but they weren't really dropping. They were close, but they weren't dropping. He got the corner one to drop right before the transition 3, and that's when like the floodgates started opening for the Knicks. And I forget who did the recap. Was it Miranda? Was it I forget who did it, but someone was like, the Knicks knew they were the better team. Like they just knew. And this is like the perfect example of that. Like they were down 10. Mikal's just like, yo, I'm doing what the fuck I want. You guys ain't shit. Like whatever. And Cat's play was like that as well. Nikias Duncan on Twitter, on X, posted about like how this was one of his better driving games. Usually in the past, when Cat drives a lot, he's kind of out of control and he's really fast, but like too fast for his own good. And he's always fucking on the edge of an offensive foul at any given moment, or throwing it into the stands or into the defense. And he's like finding it, at least versus the Heat, he kind of found that line of like, what's the most reckless physical drives I can have without an offensive foul. Like he found that line and like crept right up to it and just kept doing that because again, everybody on the Heat is tiny. Their tallest player is Jovic, and Bam is their center, who is great at defense, but he's not 7'1" or whatever. So Cat was like, I'm just gonna go and you guys can foul me if you can try to stop me, because you can't stop me. And it kind of worked. It was one of those things, I tweeted about it, like he had to learn how to do like closeout drives in Minnesota as a power forward, because every power forward has to do that. But he had to navigate that with Rudy there, which makes it harder for someone that big like Cat. But here in New York, all of a sudden he's doing the same closeout drives, but there's no, it's 5 out for him, right? We talk about 5 out for Brunson, but it's 5 out for Cat as well. So like there's space for him to do his thing there. And we were all kind of wondering, like, where is a lot of Cat's offense going to come from, right? Like, is it going to be like the elbow, like we saw in preseason? Is it going to be in the post, like back when he played for Tibbs before? And it's been a little bit of those things, but more so than that, it's really been driving. And the other cool thing about the drives that I noticed in the Miami game were like, we finally got some pick and roll action where Towns would read. So like if he saw the other guys in drop, he would pop. If he saw them up instead of in drop, he would get the ball and drive. And then by the second half, the defense had no fucking idea what he was going to do, and he kept them guessing. So like it's crazy. Like this offense is already performing really well, and they're still only scratching the surface of like how much of a buzzsaw they can be. We got to the Heat game was to me the first game where we really saw like hints of like this team just being like a fucking bazooka, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's like this is where I'm kind of, I mean, I've been saying this since the offseason, really, just like, especially since they did the Cat trade, where it was like, look, I don't think this team is going to be consistent. I don't think they're going to be ripping off huge win streaks until about 20 games in. So what you want to see are signs and stretches of progress. Like, yeah, they lost that Cleveland game, but if you go back and watch the game without kind of like being stuck in the moment of them blowing a 13-point lead and all that stuff, like there were a lot of good signs of progress in that game, and that's against a team who right now is playing like the best team in the NBA, or one of the best teams in the NBA, maybe the second best team if you want to say the Thunder, but I would say they've been better. They've looked better than the Thunder to me because they're not just like being God mode on defense. They're actually playing really good two-way ball right now. I'm not trying to do like the moral victory thing of like, oh, well, it was a good loss. No, but like you play like that against a team that is firing on all cylinders, that has a level of continuity that you just don't. I think that's like a pretty positive sign for long-term progress, especially when you look at how they fared against Boston in the first game, right? Who you would say is, when they're really like all together and locked in and all that shit, is the best team in the NBA. So you look at kind of like get absolutely walloped in that first game in the most pathetic fashion possible to what happened in the Cleveland game. And like, sure, yeah, I think Garland went off, and obviously Mitchell had a good game too. Like, I thought, like, I honestly did not think the defense was that bad down the stretch of that game. I thought that Cleveland made a lot of like shots that you kind of, I'm not even going to say they're tough shots, but they're shots you kind of have to like, all right, like I can't really stop you from taking that shot that often. The Knicks didn't get destroyed on the glass in that game. They did not get bullied or anything like that, which to me was a concern given kind of like the change and shift of our overall personnel, right? When you go from like, we're this big fucking hulking bully ball team over the last couple of years to what we are now, where it's not quite that, especially with Precious and Mitchell Robinson out.
The Knicks got a lot of good shots, like Brunson in particular got a lot of shots that like, are they bad shots for most players in the league? Yes, but like they're just floaters and mid-range shots that he makes at a high percentage. And on the flip side, like, Darius Garland was fucking cashing all the shit that he had. So like there was some level of like shot making, not variance, but just like make or miss league on some level, right? Like if two teams are operating well, especially one of them as much as Cleveland, and they're hitting, a lot of shots, then you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah. And like, again, when you talk about signs of progress, like it's not just about players gelling on the floor. It's also like Tibbs figuring out his rotations. And, I don't think like, I know that everybody's been like, oh, well, Tibbs is just going to run these guys on the ground. This is what he does. That's what he like, it's his MO. And like, I get that, like, that's kind of his MO. I also think that you have to take it with a grain of salt when he's shorthanded right now. Look, you're down 2 guys that were expected to be in the rotation and all of a sudden aren't from like you got that thrown onto your plate a game before, like right before the season started, right? Precious gets hurt in the last game of preseason, and Shamet gets hurt, dislocates his shoulder the game before that. Like, that's a lot to handle. And it's easy for any of us to be like, give Dottie minutes, like give Huck Porty minutes. And I get that. I also feel like, one, I think Tiz has earned the benefit of the doubt as far as overall young player development track, how he integrates them, all that stuff. Like his track record with Emmanuel Quickly, with Quentin Grimes before he turned into a huge fucking raging loser. Deuce McBride, on and on. Like you can even, even guys that have like come in and like have kind of like seen their stocks or, from what they were previously. Isaiah Hartenstein, who I know was good with the Clippers. He was clearly took a big leap with the Knicks. Dante DiVincenzo. Like there's just a lot of guys, younger players, rookies we've drafted, whatever, where Tibbs has pushed them to a higher level or improved them or integrated them, however you want to put it, and developed them to higher stations in their career. And, you could be frustrated with like, well, and we've all been frustrated, but like, all right, well, it's great that you like developed Emmanuel Quickly to a certain point, but why can't you play him? Why can't you give him a chance to start or whatever? And like, I think those are separate conversations from his actual ability to like see what a young player has, figure out what track of development he wants to put them on, figure out, okay, what is the role that I can put this player in that he can succeed in right now, and letting them go from there. Mitchell Robinson, obviously another player that he's done a really good job of developing. And if his evaluation right now is Pacome Dadier is not ready, I don't know why that is. And luckily he's the third youngest player in the league, so it's not really like some absurd stance if Tibbs is like, yeah, I just think he needs time to.
It's just funny because he played in the first quarter of the first game versus the defending champions. If he didn't play versus Boston, we'd just be like, oh, Tibbs is never letting this kid play. Of course he is it.
Yeah. So I think like it's okay. And he might have just thrown him in there to be like, all right, let's just see how he looks for a few minutes. And, I thought he looked okay. I thought he was fine, actually. But I trust Tibbs to just maybe be like, maybe there's stuff that he wasn't doing or that he has not shown yet consistently in practice and all that stuff that he's waiting to see before he gives them an opportunity. It's also important to remember, like, this is an 18-year-old kid coming from France or from Germany, I guess. He is French, but he played in Germany. And sure, he played professional ball, but you want to be careful with these. Like, he's not just acclimating as an NBA player, he's also acclimating culturally, right? Like, it's a very like Europe to America is not the same thing. So that's another piece of it to consider. And also just like, hey, like sometimes if you throw a guy into the fire too early and they stink it up, and then you pull them, like if you were like, okay, Dadia, you're part of the rotation, he's terrible for 10 games, and you had to pull him from the rotation, what does that do to his confidence? So I think there's like enough evidence where we should err on the side of Tibbs's judgment. I know that's crazy for me to say after not feeling that way previously, to say the least. But I think, his track record at this point speaks to that, and the success he's had gives him that benefit of the doubt to me. And then as far as like Huck Porty goes, he did give him a chance against Cleveland. Like he played him over Jericho Sims. So it's not to me that he's like never going to play again and now Jericho Sims is the guy. For like, we don't know
we're trying to fit current Tibbs behavior into old Tibbs patterns, and you got to throw all that shit out the window. He is already experimenting with more shit. He experimented more last year than he did like the previous whatever years combined. And in the first few games this season, this man is like, I mean, part of it is he has intuitive players who know how to play together, but like this guy is like running like off ball shit and like deco, like he's I'm like, who is this guy? Who's our coach? They're wilding out here with the fucking ways and maybe it's just that simple when you have Cat at the 5 and it just expands your playbook so much, right? But like it's not quite like Rick Carlisle level where like there's a zillion plays and counters and stuff like that, but it's I think assuming that Tibbs is Tibbsy because of past Tibbs reasons now is dangerous just because he hasn't really had a team like this, and he has slowly but surely shown that he's willing to play to the analytics and evolve his team once he has continuity. And I know there's no like, yes, Randall's gone, DDV's gone, the play style's different. It's not offensive rebound grifting, but like there's continuity in the sense that the offense is still based around Jalen Brunson isolations and pick and rolls. Like it's still based around finding ways for Jalen Brunson to destroy weak links on the other team. Like all the other guys are planets orbiting the sun of Jalen Brunson. That is the same. And like he just hasn't had that since like Derrick Rose. So, and the league's a lot different now than back in that time, obviously. So I personally find myself not as pessimistic about like, is Dadier going to play or not? Like he's a kid. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Is Hugporty going to play or not? Like Sims sucks. He has also sucked slightly less the last two games. Like I will say that. Like, you know, like it is what it is. Like he hasn't had as many defensive just brain farts as he normally has. So like from an accountability perspective, even if you think Sims sucks, if he's like locking in for Sims standards and doing better, like of course Tibbs has to give him a shot. Of course he does. And you know, there's some level of politics there, and is it a little weird and annoying? Sure, but like when you're talking about a guy who your team, you know, this is the end of bench payment, but like he got paid, and Hugporty's a 22-year-old 58th pick, like I don't think you can just, there's some level of like locker room politics about just punching someone like that for Hugporty, and it's not a fucking big deal either way, but I feel like if Jericho has shown that he can play okay, which he did the last two games, then like fine, let him play, man. Hugporty's time will come. I don't think any of this stuff is lost on Tibbs. I did a video that hasn't come out yet on Hugporty versus Cleveland, and he was pretty good. He was pretty fucking good on is solely on his defense, and just looking at it play by play and for his whole stint, and he was very solid. There was maybe one play where he was like really bad, and that play was also Darius Garland just like being a little bit of a wizard. So like his time will come. It's like that clip where that was circulating with Deuce telling Hugporty like, yo, these blowouts will come, and that's when you got to show out, and then you'll get your minutes. Like his time will come. It's a long season.